I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. After 8 years of silence, 8 years of holidays alone, of birthdays that passed without a phone call, of learning to stop waiting, there she was, my sister-in-law Paulette, standing on the front porch of my new mountain cabin with a suitcase at her feet and that smile I had learned, very slowly and at great cost, never to trust. I didn't move. I just stood there in my socks on the hardwood floor, holding my coffee cup, watching her through that small circle of glass like she was something that had appeared in a dream. Behind her, I could see my brother, Gerald. He was looking at his phone. He didn't even look up at the door. I want you to stay with me until the end of this story because what happened next, what I found out, what I did, and what finally changed, I still think about every single day. And if you've ever had family show up after years of silence wanting something from you, you're going to understand every word of this. My name is not important. What matters is that I'm 63 years old, recently widowed, and 2 months before all of this happened, I had done something brave. I had sold the house my late husband Martin and I had shared for 31 years, the house where I raised my children, where I planted a rose garden I could no longer bear to look at, and I had bought a small A-frame cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. Just me, just a new start. Martin had been gone for 2 years by then. 2 years of grief so heavy it had a physical weight to it, like wearing a wet coat you could never take off. My daughter, Simone, had been my lifeline. She lived 40 minutes away in Asheville and called me every morning without fail. My son, Patrick, was in Portland and we talked every Sunday. They were the ones who encouraged me to sell. "Mom, you've been ready for months," Simone told me. "You just afraid to admit it." She was right. The cabin was not large. 2 bedrooms, a loft, a kitchen with a window that looked directly out at the tree line, and a porch wide enough for 2 rocking chairs. I had furnished it slowly, deliberately, choosing every piece myself. There was no ghost of Martin's absence here, because Martin had never been here. That sounds cruel, but it wasn't. It was survival. I had told almost no one the address. That was the detail that kept circling back to me as I stood there at the door. I had told almost no one. I had posted nothing about it online. Simone had actually helped me clean up my Facebook months earlier, after a difficult situation with a cousin who had started showing up uninvited to things. I had been careful. I had been deliberate. So how did Paulette know where I lived? I opened the door. "Surprise," she said, and she opened her arms like we were old friends reuniting at an airport. Like 8 years was nothing. Like the last time I had seen her face, she hadn't stood in the kitchen of my home and told me, in a voice so calm it frightened me, that I was the reason my brother Gerald had never reached his potential. I did not step forward to hug her. "Paulette," I said. "Gerald." My brother finally looked up from his phone. "Hey sis," he said. "I have a younger brother and I love him." That is the most complicated sentence I have ever written. I love Gerald the way you love something that has also caused you tremendous pain, carefully from a distance, with one hand always ready to cover the wound. Gerald is 60 now, 2 years younger than me, and he has spent most of his adult life making choices that seem designed to make everyone around him uncomfortable. Paulette was his 3rd wife. She had arrived in his life about 10 years ago with an enormous amount of energy, strong opinions about family finances, and a talent for slowly, expertly driving a wedge between Gerald and everyone who had ever cared about him. His first estrangement had been from our mother, who passed away without the 2 of them having reconciled. I try not to think about that too hard. His estrangement from me had started over something that felt small at the time. I had declined to co-sign a loan for a business venture that Gerald and Paulette wanted to start, a boutique, in a town neither of them lived in, with a business plan that was, to put it gently, aspirational. I had said no. I had explained why, calmly, with documents and numbers. Paulette had decided that meant I didn't believe in my brother. Within 3 weeks, the calls stopped. Gerald stopped answering my texts. For Christmas that year, I sent a card and a gift card because I didn't know what else to do. It came back unopened. For 8 years, I sent birthday cards. For 8 years, I left voicemails that were never returned. I kept a box in the closet of the old house, Of all the things I had saved to give Gerald eventually, a watch that had belonged to our father, some old photographs, letters from our grandmother that I had found when I cleaned out our mother's estate. I had kept half, set aside half for him. I didn't know how to reach him anymore. I just kept waiting, and then there he was, on my porch, with his wife and a suitcase. "Can we come in?" Paulette asked. She was already picking up the suitcase. Yes, I said. I don't know why I said yes. I don't know why I said yes. I have replayed that moment many times. I think I was in shock. I think some part of me was still the younger self who had spent decades trying to keep this family together, and that part of me reacted before the wiser, older part could intervene. They came in. Paulette walked through my living room the way people walk through a place they're already considering rearranging. She touched the back of my sofa. She looked at the loft stairs. She looked at the loft stairs. She went to the kitchen window and looked out at the trees. "This is darling," she said. Smaller than I pictured, but darling. I turned to Gerald. "How did you find me?" He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Ran into Cousin Elaine at the hardware store. She mentioned you'd bought a place up in the mountains. Said you seemed happy. I made a note to have a conversation with Cousin Elaine." "You came a long way," I said. "It's a 4-hour drive from Greensboro." "We wanted to see you," Gerald said. And the thing is, he sounded sincere. He has always sounded sincere. He has always sounded sincere. That was always the complicated part. Paulette came back from the kitchen. "We were thinking," she said, in a tone that suggested the thinking had been done entirely by her, "that since you have the extra bedroom, we could stay a while. Gerald's been going through some things. Job stuff. We've had to let our apartment go temporarily, just while we get back on our feet." The room went quiet. Outside, a bird called once from somewhere in the trees. I looked at my brother. He was looking at the floor. And there it was. They had not driven 4 hours to reconcile. They had not come because they missed me. They'd come because they needed somewhere to go, and someone, Cousin Elaine, probably innocently, had told them that I lived alone in a 2-bedroom cabin in the mountains. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment. It was not just anger. Anger would have been simpler. What I felt was something older and more complicated, a grief that had been sitting in me for 8 years, suddenly ripped open again, right alongside a cold clarity that I had not had access to before. The old version of me, the one who co-signed, who kept the peace, who sent birthday cards into silence, she was still there. She was right there. But there was another version of me standing in that cabin, and she had done something hard and brave by herself. And she was not going to let this happen. "How long is a while?" I asked. "Ha ha!" Paulette smiled. "Oh, we'd figure it out as we go." "No," I said. The smile flickered. "I'm sorry?" "No," I said again. I was surprised by how steady my voice was. "You can't stay here. I'm sorry you're in a difficult situation, Gerald. I truly am. But you can't stay here." Paulette's expression shifted into something I recognized, the particular look of a person recalibrating their approach. "We've been driving 4 hours," she said. "Can we at least sit down, have some coffee, talk about this like family?" "Of course," I said. "I'll make coffee." But I also excused myself for a moment to step onto the back porch where I called Simone. "Mom, what's wrong?" I told her. In a low voice, quickly. She was silent for about 3 seconds. "I'll be there in an hour," she said. "You don't have to, Mom." "I'll be there in an hour." I went back inside and made coffee. The 3 of us sat at my small kitchen table, and Gerald talked. He talked about the business, a different business, not the boutique, a logistics company, and how a partner had behaved dishonestly, and things had fallen apart. He talked about the apartment lease. He talked about a storage unit. He talked about needing just a little time. I listened. I did not interrupt. And somewhere in the listening, I felt the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the familiar pull toward fixing, toward absorbing someone else's emergency, toward telling myself that family is family. I knew that pull. I had followed it my whole life. I didn't follow it this time. "Gerald," I said, when he paused, "I hear everything you're saying, and I'm genuinely sorry you're in this position. But I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." He looked at me. "If things had been fine, if the business had worked, if you had your apartment, Would you be sitting here right now? The silence that followed was its own answer. Paulette started to say something. I turned to her. I'm asking Gerald, I said. Quietly, clearly. Gerald rubbed the back of his neck. That's not fair, he said. It might not be fair, I said, but it's what I need to know. He didn't answer. Which was, of course, an answer. I heard a car on the gravel outside. Simone came through the front door with the energy of someone who has been protecting something she loves, which is exactly what she was doing. She hugged me first, which I needed. Then she sat down at the table. Hi, she said to Gerald. I'm Simone. I'm not sure we've actually met. Gerald looked startled. I know who you are. Right, but you left before she was old enough to really know you, I said. She was 15 when you stopped returning my calls. That landed the way I intended it to. We talked for another 2 hours. It was not comfortable. There were moments when Paulette tried to redirect the conversation toward logistics, as if the question of whether they would stay had already been settled in her mind, and we were just sorting out the details. Each time, either Simone or I gently but firmly brought it back. No, we were not settling details. The answer was no. What I had not anticipated was what happened near the end of that conversation, when Paulette stepped outside to take a phone call and it was just Gerald and me and Simone at the table. My brother looked at me, and for the first time since they'd arrived, his face was different. The performance, I hadn't even fully recognized it as a performance until it dropped, was gone. He looked tired. He looked like my little brother. I'm sorry I didn't come to Martin's funeral, he said. I had not been prepared for that. I'd sent him a message when Martin died, not even asking him to come, just telling him. My husband died. I thought you should know. He had not responded. Okay, I said, because I didn't have anything else yet. Paulette told me it would be too awkward, he said, that you wouldn't want us there. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the box in the closet of the old house, the watch, the photographs, the letters, the things I had carried with me, actually, in a box in the loft upstairs, because I hadn't been able to leave them behind even when I sold everything else. She was wrong, I said. He nodded. He looked at the table. You can't stay here, Gerald. That hasn't changed. But I'm not closed to talking. If you want to talk, without an agenda. Paulette came back in from the porch. She could read the room. She picked up her purse. We should probably find a hotel, she said. There's a good one in Boone, Simone said helpfully. About 20 minutes. They left. Gerald hugged me at the door, stiffly, like we were both remembering how to do it, and I let him. Paulette did not try to hug me, which I respected more than I would have respected the performance of it. I stood on the porch and watched their car go down the gravel drive and disappear into the trees. Simone came and stood beside me. She put her arm through mine. How are you doing? She asked. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Ask me in a week. We went back inside. She helped me wash the coffee cups. We didn't talk much, just existed in the same space the way you can with someone who loves you, without conditions. Outside the window, the trees were doing their slow autumn thing, going gold and amber in the afternoon light. Later that evening, after Simone had gone home, I sat in one of the rocking chairs on the porch. The mountains were going dark at the edges. The air smelled like October, cold and wood smoke and something green underneath. I thought about the box in the loft, about the watch that had been our father's. I thought about Gerald's face when the performance dropped, about him saying he was sorry he hadn't come to the funeral. I don't know what the future of that relationship looks like. I don't know if there is one, really, or if there are just occasional windows. Brief, difficult, honest. When two people who came from the same place can look at each other clearly. What I know is that I didn't let them move in. What I know is that I didn't fold, and I didn't yell, and I didn't spend the night crying over what my family could have been if things had been different. I had already spent years doing that. I was done spending that particular currency. There's a thing that happens, I think, when you're a certain age and you've already done the hard part. Lost a spouse, sold a house, started over from scratch, and someone tries to walk through the door of your new life and take up space they haven't earned. Something in you just knows. You don't have to think about it. You just know. My cabin is still mine. The coffee is still mine. The window and the trees and the quiet mornings and the October air. Mine. I rebuilt this life out of grief and courage and about 30 boxes of carefully labeled moving supplies, and nobody is just wandering into it because they ran out of other options. That's not coldness. I want to be clear about that. It's just finally knowing the difference between love and a door left open by habit. Gerald texted me 3 weeks later, no ask in it, just a text. Said he'd been thinking about what I said. I wrote back, we've talked twice since then. Short calls. Careful, like walking on new ice. I don't know where it goes, but both times Paulette wasn't the one who dialed. I still have the box, the watch, the photographs, our grandmother's letters. I'm not ready to give them to him yet, but I haven't stopped thinking about it. That's enough for now. That's actually more than enough. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately, not in any grand philosophical way, just in the quiet, practical way you think about things when you're 63 and you've had enough life behind you to see how the patterns work. Paulette didn't show up at my cabin because she was cruel, exactly. She showed up because, for decades, behavior like hers had been rewarded. Someone had always said yes. Someone had always moved aside. And Gerald, my brother, who I love in that careful, complicated way, had spent years watching people absorb the consequences of choices they didn't make. And somewhere in that pattern, he stopped making choices at all. That's not an excuse. It's just what I've come to understand. The thing about people who take is that they don't usually know they're taking. They've built a story around it. In Paulette's story, she was practical. She was direct. She knew how to get things done. In that story, my cabin was a solution to a problem, and I was the person standing between her family and stability. I had played a role before, the one who almost said yes to the loan, the one who kept sending birthday cards into silence, and she had every reason to believe I'd play it again. What she didn't account for was the 2 years I'd spent grieving, rebuilding, learning to live alone in a house full of memories, and then finally doing something that required me to choose myself so completely that there was no going back. When you sell the house you lived in for 31 years and start over from nothing, something in you changes. You find out what you're made of. You find out, maybe for the first time clearly, what you're willing to carry and what you're not. I'm not going to tell you I handled that afternoon perfectly. I let them in when I should have bought myself more time at the door. I felt the old pull. I felt it hard, and only Simone's voice on the phone reminded me that I didn't have to do this alone. That's not weakness. That's just being human. The wisdom wasn't in never feeling the pull. The wisdom was in recognizing it for what it was and choosing differently anyway. Gerald said he was sorry he missed Martin's funeral. I believe him. I think somewhere underneath all the years and the distance and Paulette's careful management of his relationships, there is still my little brother. I don't know how much of him is left or how much can be rebuilt, but the conversation we've had since, careful, short, honest, those feel like something real, not a performance, not an ask, just two people from the same family trying to figure out if there's still a way back to each other. What I know for certain is this. The life I built in that cabin, I built myself, out of grief and effort, and a lot of early mornings sitting with coffee in the particular silence of mountains. No one is walking into that life on the strength of a blood connection alone. Love is real. Family is real, but love without accountability is just habit, and I'm done mistaking habit for something I owe. If you've been holding a door open for someone who keeps walking through it empty-handed, this story is for you, not to make you cold, just to remind you that you're allowed to decide what comes in.